It was one of those nights that starts with casual plans and somehow stretches into the early hours of the morning. My best friend Jake and I had been out with a group of friends, celebrating a birthday at a bar downtown. We'd known each other since freshman year of college, 5 years of friendship that had weathered career changes, bad breakups, and countless late-night conversations. Jake was the kind of friend everyone wants, reliable, funny, and genuinely caring. He was also undeniably handsome, something I'd noticed from day one, but had carefully compartmentalized away in the box labeled straight best friend. The night had been nothing special, just drinks and laughter, reminiscing about old stories and creating new ones. But as the evening wound down and people started heading home, Jake and I stayed behind, caught up in a conversation about his recent job promotion. We lost track of time, and it wasn't until he checked his phone that panic flashed across his face. "Dude, I missed the last train," he said, running his hand through his dark hair, a habit I'd seen countless times when he was stressed. "It left 15 minutes ago. I lived just a 10-minute walk from the bar, in a small one-bedroom apartment that I decorated with more care than I'd admit to most people." Jake lived on the other side of the city, and at this hour, rideshare prices were surging to ridiculous amounts. The solution seemed obvious. "Just crash at my place," I offered, trying to sound casual, like it wasn't a big deal, like my heart wasn't suddenly beating a little faster. "It's not like you haven't stayed over before." And he had, on my couch, after parties or movie marathons. But tonight was different. 2 weeks earlier, I'd replaced my old couch with a stylish armchair that absolutely couldn't double as a bed unless you were a contortionist. Jake seemed to remember this at the same moment I did. "What about your couch? Didn't you get rid of it?" "Yeah," I admitted, hesitating for just a second before adding, "but my bed's big enough. It's not a big deal." He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Thanks, man. You're a lifesaver." The walk to my apartment was filled with comfortable chatter, the kind that comes easily after years of friendship. We talked about nothing and everything. His new project at work, my writer's block on a freelance piece I was working on, a movie we both wanted to see. Normal, everyday conversation that helped me ignore the nervous energy building in my chest. When we reached my apartment, the reality of the situation started to sink in. I busied myself finding him a spare toothbrush, a t-shirt to sleep in, anything to distract from the thought of sharing my bed with him. It wasn't that we weren't physically comfortable around each other. We'd hugged countless times, fallen asleep on each other during movie nights, even shared hotel rooms on trips. But this felt different, more intimate somehow. "Your place is looking good," Jake commented, looking around at the changes I'd made since his last visit. "That new chair really works in here." "Thanks," I replied, tossing him the t-shirt. "Though right now I'm kind of regretting not getting another couch." He laughed, catching the shirt with one hand. "Don't worry about it. We're adults. We can share a bed without it being weird." But could we? I wasn't so sure. Not when I'd spent years carefully maintaining the boundaries of our friendship, never letting my occasional thoughts about him cross into dangerous territory. We took turns in the bathroom, the domestic routine oddly comfortable despite my inner turmoil. When I emerged from brushing my teeth, Jake was already sitting on the edge of my bed, scrolling through his phone. He'd changed into the t-shirt I'd given him, an old concert tee that was slightly too small for him, stretching across his shoulders in a way that made me quickly avert my eyes. "Left or right?" he asked, looking up from his phone. "I usually sleep on the left," I replied, switching off the main light and leaving just the bedside lamp glowing softly. "Right side it is, then." We both climbed into bed, and I was immediately aware of every inch of space between us. My queen-sized bed, which normally felt spacious for just me, suddenly seemed much smaller. I lay rigidly on my side, careful not to let any part of me cross the invisible boundary line down the middle of the mattress. "You okay?" Jake asked after a moment, turning his head to look at me. "You seem tense." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing myself to relax my shoulders. "Just tired." He nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. We lay there in silence for a while, the only sound the distant hum of traffic outside and our breathing, gradually synchronizing without either of us noticing. "Remember that road trip we took junior year?" Jake asked suddenly, his voice quiet in the dim room. "When we got lost in Pennsylvania because you insisted your phone's GPS was better than the actual map?" I laughed, grateful for the break in tension. "Hey, We found that amazing diner because of my detour. Their pancakes were worth getting lost for. True, he conceded, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We've had some good adventures, haven't we? The best, I agreed, turning onto my side to face him, feeling brave enough now that we were reminiscing about safe topics. He mirrored my position, and in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, I could see his expression, thoughtful, warm, and something else I couldn't quite identify. We were still a respectable distance apart, but it felt like the space between us had somehow shrunk. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met? He asked, his voice taking on that philosophical tone he got when he was tired but not quite ready to sleep. All the time, I admitted. I probably wouldn't have survived statistics without your help. He laughed softly, and I would never have discovered my love for spicy food if you hadn't dragged me to that Thai place. I've been a good influence, I teased. The best, he replied, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more serious. You know you're my favorite person, right? My heart did a little flip in my chest. Even more than your brother? Don't tell him, but yeah. We fell into another comfortable silence, but something had changed in the atmosphere. I was acutely aware of every movement, every breath. When Jake shifted slightly, adjusting his position, he ended up a few inches closer to me. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. Is this okay? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I managed to reply, hoping he couldn't hear the slight tremor in my voice. It's fine. Let me explain why this moment mattered so much. In 5 years of friendship, we'd never acknowledged the subtle current that sometimes ran beneath our interactions, the lingering hugs, the way his eyes sometimes stayed on me a beat too long, the jealousy I occasionally felt when he talked about dates. We'd built our friendship on solid ground, but there had always been these moments, these tiny fractures in the foundation where something else peeked through. Can I ask you something? Jake said after a while, his voice serious in a way that made my stomach tighten with anticipation. Always. He hesitated, and I could almost see him weighing his words carefully. Have you ever thought about us differently? My heart seemed to stop for a moment before racing ahead at double speed. What do you mean? I don't know, he said, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Sometimes I just wonder if there's something else here. Between us. The room suddenly felt too warm, too small. Years of carefully maintained boundaries were threatening to collapse with just a few words. I could lie, brush it off as late-night nonsense, preserve the safety of our friendship. Or I could be honest, take a risk that could change everything. Sometimes, I admitted finally, my voice barely audible even in the quiet room. But I never thought you'd. I mean, you're straight. He was quiet for so long that I started to panic, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I've always thought of myself that way, he said slowly. But lately I've been wondering if maybe it's not that simple, especially when it comes to you. The admission hung in the air between us, monumental and fragile at the same time. I didn't know what to say, how to navigate this unexpected territory. All these years of friendship, and suddenly we were having the conversation I'd convinced myself would never happen. I don't want to mess this up, I said finally. You're too important to me. You're important to me too, he replied, shifting again, closing the distance between us by another inch. That's why I've never said anything before. But tonight, being here with you like this, it feels like maybe we should talk about it. I nodded, not trusting my voice. In the soft glow of the lamp, his eyes looked darker, more intense than usual. I'd seen him in countless lights over the years, laughing in bright sunlight, serious under fluorescent office lights, relaxed in the golden hour of sunset, but never quite like this, vulnerable and questioning in the intimacy of my bedroom. Can I? He started, then paused, seeming to gather his courage. Can I try something? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Yes. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and placed his hand over mine where it rested on the mattress between us. Such a simple touch, but it sent electricity racing up my arm. His hand was warm, slightly calloused from the rock climbing he'd gotten into last year. Familiar, but in this context, entirely new. Is this okay? He asked again, his voice lower than before. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For a moment, we just stayed like that, his hand on mine, both of us breathing a little faster than normal, the weight of 5 years of friendship and unspoken feelings pressing down on us. Then, with the same deliberate slowness, he moved closer, eliminating most of the remaining space between us. We weren't quite touching except for our hands, but I could feel the heat of his body, smell the familiar scent of his shampoo mixed with the faint trace of the bar we'd been at earlier. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he confessed, his voice a whisper now. "About you. About us. I just never knew how to bring it up." "Me too," I admitted, finding my voice at last. "But I was afraid of ruining what we have. You're my best friend, Jake. And you're mine," he said firmly. "That's not going to change. Whatever happens, or doesn't happen between us, that's the one thing I'm sure of." The sincerity in his voice gave me courage. Slowly, I turned my hand under his, interlacing our fingers. His breath caught audibly, and I saw something flash in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or relief. "So what now?" I asked, the question encompassing so much more than just this moment. "Now," he said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I think we should get some sleep. It's late, and this is a lot to process. For both of us." There was wisdom in his suggestion, even if part of me wanted to stay awake all night, exploring this new dimension of our relationship. But he was right, we had time. Whatever was happening between us didn't need to be rushed. "Okay," I agreed. "Sleep sounds good." But neither of us moved to increase the distance between us. If anything, as I reached over to switch off the lamp, he moved slightly closer, our bodies now just barely touching at the shoulders and knees. In the darkness, every point of contact seemed magnified. "Good night," he whispered. "Good night," I replied, my heart still racing but with excitement now rather than anxiety. I didn't expect to fall asleep easily, but the emotional weight of the evening had left me more exhausted than I realized. Just as I was drifting off, I felt Jake shift beside me, his arm tentatively coming to rest across my waist. It was a question as much as a gesture, and I answered by moving slightly closer, fitting myself against him in a way that felt both new and somehow inevitable. Morning would bring conversations, questions, possibly complications. We'd have to figure out what this meant for us, for our friendship, for the futures we'd both been planning. But in that moment, with Jake's steady breathing warming the back of my neck and his arms secure around me, those concerns seemed distant and manageable. The truth was, whatever happened next, we'd face it together, just as we had everything else for the past 5 years. Only now, there was a new possibility opening before us, one I'd never allowed myself to seriously consider. The possibility that my straight best friend might not be so straight after all, at least not when it came to me, and that the careful distance I'd maintained all these years might have been unnecessary. As sleep finally claimed me, my last conscious thought was that missing the last train home might have been the best thing that ever happened to us. Sometimes, it takes an unexpected detour to find your way to where you're supposed to be. And right now, wrapped in the warmth of Jake's embrace, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close, and Jake's arm was still draped over me. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, wondering if he would regret last night's conversation in the harsh light of day. Wondering if I should pretend to be asleep to give him an easy exit if he needed one. But then I felt him stir behind me, his arm tightening slightly around my waist instead of pulling away. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep and right next to my ear, sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. "Morning," I replied, finally allowing myself to believe that this wasn't a dream, that we had actually crossed that invisible line we'd been dancing around for years. As I turned to face him, taking in his sleep-rumpled hair and the soft smile on his face, I knew that whatever happened next, our friendship had evolved into something new. Something that had perhaps been there all along, just waiting for the right moment. A missed train, a shared bed, and the courage to finally speak the truth. Total _char_count, 13,561.